Welcome back to the Snowpoint cast. Today we're going to be going over a deck called GG. GG is short for Gardevoir Gallade. The deck saw play from 2008 to 2010, but today we're going to be going over the 2010 list. But yeah, let's get right into it. So deck plays 4 Ralts. Ralts has a free attack, which is kind of interesting. So the free attack it has is called Future Sight. Look at the top 5 cards of either player's deck and put them back on top of that player's deck in any order. So really good if you're bricking, like if you start a Ralts and you don't really have anything in your hand, at least you control your top deck for the next 5 turns so that it's not like if you have a Roseanne's at the very bottom of your 5, you're not just like waiting those 5 turns for Roseanne's. So yeah, it's got 60 HP. Hypnoblast is okay too. For 10, flip a coin of heads, the defending Pokemon is now asleep. Psychic weakness, but the reason you play it is really Gardevoir. Future Sight's definitely decent though. So you play 2 Kirlia as well. Kirlia has 2 attacks. Both of them are pretty decent. The first one is Teleportation Burst. So for 30, you do 30 for a Psychic and a Colorless, and then you switch with one of your bench Pokemon. And that doesn't seem that great, but it's actually really nice because you can Teleportation Burst into a Spiritomb. Spiritomb has Keystone Seal, and it just says your opponent's active, or all your opponents can't use any trainer cards, and neither can you. Sorry, rather. So yeah, Teleportation Burst is okay. You can switch into a Spiritomb, and then Super Cybolt for a Psychic double colorless. Also pretty decent. It lets you potentially one-shot a Gardevoir if you have an Expert Belt on your Kirlia, and then you go Psychic DCE. You're doing 80 plus 30 on the Gardevoir as a knockout, which is really nice. But yeah, so Kirlia is pretty decent as well. The whole line, other than the like even the Ralts and the Kirlia are definitely decent. It's nice when you have like Prevos that can at least do something. But yeah, the reason you play these is for Telepass Gardevoir. So Telepass Gardevoir has 110 HP and a Poke Power and attack. Honestly, I think this card is probably one of the best cards Pokemon's ever printed. This card is so good, and like it dominated play from when it was printed to when it got rotated. Like it got second at the 2010 World Championships, and you know that if a card has like been this successful for that many years, like it's definitely got some spunk behind it. So the Poke Power is called Telepass. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may search your opponent's discard pile for a supporter card and use the effect of that card as the effect of this power. So that's crazy good. It essentially means that you can support a card twice in a turn, right? Because you can use your own supporter, and then if your opponent's not bricking, you can Telepass for their supporter, which is so good. It just means that like no matter what their draw is, you're still doing something, and even if you're bricking, and unless your opponent's bricking too, you're still doing something. So yeah, Telepass is really, really strong, and it just like there's so many good uses for it. Telepass for a judge is really good to disturb your opponent. Telepass for Roseanne's just so you're consistent on energy. Yeah, Telepass is so also has a attack called Psychic Lock, which is another reason the card is so good. So Psychic Lock for a Psychic and a double colorless energy does 60, and then during your opponent's next turn, your opponent can't use any powers on his or her Pokemon. So that is like really, really good. Power locking in this format is like, it's really good. Because the main consistency in this format is mainly power Pokemon. So like Uxie, you also, a lot of decks play Claydol. Claydol's a really good card as well. And being able to just shut those off, it makes your opponent's deck, you know, that much more bricky. They're that much more reliant on, oh well, I hope I hit a raw supporter for sure, otherwise I'm not going to be doing anything this turn. Psychic Lock also shuts off Garchomp C level X's ability, Healing Breath, which can be really good. It just means that, you know, if you're doing 60, even if your opponent's switching around, they're not just like switching around and then healing breathing everything. But yeah, it shuts off like so many powers. There's too many powers in the format to like go over all the powers that Gardevoir shuts off, but it is a really good effective and attack because the powers in this format are so good. So you're weak to Psychic. The interesting part about this format is the weaknesses are a little bit different. So like Ralts was plus 10 weakness, Kirlia was plus 20, and then this Gardevoir is plus 30, and level X's are times 2. So kind of an interesting change that they made. They reverted back to just the times 2 weakness. I think around like black-white format, but definitely a little cool thing that they did there for a little while. So you also play 1 Gallade. Gallade is really good as well. It's got 2 attacks. The first one's called Sonic Blade. Sonic Blade for a fighting and a colorless, put your opponent's active Pokemon down to 50 HP, and then they switch it with one of their bench Pokemon. So that is definitely solid, because if your opponent has, like, let's say a big Garchomp, or let's say a Luxray, because we used Garchomp in the last comparison, a Luxray with like an expert belt on it. It's got like 130 HP, and you know, you're probably just going to hit that for fighting weakness anyway. But let's say Gyarados. Gyarados is actually a really good example. So say your opponent has a Gyarados with 150 HP on it, and you're just like, I don't want to deal with this Gyarados, because Gyarados is a really scary card, and it can do a lot of damage for 0. So you put it down to 50. You essentially did 100 damage for a fighting and a colorless, which is really good. And then forcing your opponent to switch is also really good, because it means that that Gyarados player has to have like a switch out to get back, because they only have one Gyarados ever attacking. So the fact that you can just like force them back is really good. And then it also has some synergy with the Gardevoir level X's Bring Down. Bring Down, I'll go over it in a second, but essentially it takes the lowest HP Pokemon and kills it. So being able to put your opponent's Pokemon down to 50 is really good, because all of your Pokemon have 60 HP or greater. Like this, the Spiritomb is the lowest HP Pokemon that you have, and it's 60 HP. So being able to hit your opponent down to 50 and then bring down, it just means that if they have a massive threat in the active, not only are you switching it with their bench Pokemon so that you don't have to worry about it potentially next turn, but also you're saying, I'm going to put you to the bench, and then if you're not able to figure something out in this next turn, I'm going to bring you down. So that's super good as well. It also has a second attack. The second attack is called Psychic Cut. Sorry, all these cards are Japanese, so I have to like go off memory for all this. So Psychic Cut does 60, and then you can flip over a face down prize card, and you can flip over as many as you want, and it does 20 for each prize that you flipped. So let's say you have 6 prizes and you flip all of them, it does 120 damage. So that's really good. It maxes out at 140 with an expert belt, which is a ton of damage. Enough to take out pretty much anything in the format except for a Gyarados with an expert belt. But yeah, super good as well. And it's interesting that he has Sonic Blade for a fighting and Psychic Cut for a psychic. I mean, it makes sense because he's a psychic fighting Pokemon, but it's just interesting how they like made it really inconvenient to play in any deck that doesn't play Roseanne's. So yeah, the deck also plays one Gardevoir level X. Gardevoir level X is super good. So it has that attack Bring Down that I was talking about earlier. For 2 psychic, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon or yours with the fewest remaining HP, and then it's just straight knocked out. So you don't have to worry about like doing damage. You can snipe, and like I said, it's really good with Sonic Cut. But also, if you just like play smart, like if you don't just drop Spiritombs needlessly in the middle of the game, a lot of your Pokemon are like stage 2s or like have a stage 1 of all, like Claydol's a stage 1, so it has 80, which is kind of low, but like Dusknoir is 120, Nidoqueen is 120. So you have like a lot of high HP Pokemon, and even if, you know, eventually your little HP Pokemon get knocked out, it just makes Bring Down all that much more powerful, because it just says, I'm going to keep a ton of HP and then slap expert belts everywhere where I need more HP. And then if you have any sprites on your bench and I don't, I'm just gonna bring you down, which is really nice too, because Telepass, it kind of allows you to cheat a little bit. A lot of decks play like multiple Uxie and like a thick Claydol line, but you don't really play that in this deck. You play a 1/1 Claydol line and like 1 Uxie. And Uxie is kind of a liability when it comes to Bring Down, because like if you bench your own Uxie, sure, it's nice, you get to drop to 7, it's really good. But if you're able to get by with only telepassing, it means that your Bring Downs are that much more powerful, because you don't have an Uxie on your board that's kind of mitigating the potential of your Gardevoir level X. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting that you can do that with Gardevoir. Teleportation is Gardevoir level X's power. It's also pretty good. Once during your turn before you attack, choose one of your active Pokemon or one of your bench Pokemon and switch it with Gardevoir. So it just lets the Gardevoir switch wherever you want, which is really nice. I mean, you can't do it if you're affected by a special condition, but that's the effect of every power. But yeah, kind of, it's really nice with Nidoqueen, especially. Like, it just lets you like switch around, Psychic Lock, retreat, heal some, switch into a different one, Psychic Lock some more, and then just like switch around your Pokemon so that you're not worried about keeping one of the active and having it getting knocked out. You are ×2 weak to Psychic, which can be a bit of a pain, but you do play a tech to stop that from being that big. 130 HP, definitely really strong. So you play 3 Spiritomb from Arceus. Spiritomb is really good. So you have 60 HP. Poke Body called Keystone Seal. Keystone Seal says as long as Spiritomb is your active Pokemon, each player can't play any trainer cards from his or her hand. So like really, really powerful. Not only you get to disrupt your opponent early, but it also has a really good attack that helps you set up. So Darkness Grace for free, which is another crazy part of this format. Sometimes you just got free attacks. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon, and then put a damage counter onto Spiritomb. So that's really good. Usually like you hit a Baltoy off of your Roseannes if you can hit a Baltoy early, and then you go Baltoy, Darkness Grace into a Claydol, and then next turn you get to Claydol and you're setting up and drawing so many cards at that point. So yeah, Darkness Grace is really good. It's also kind of nice to get your stage 2 set up. You play a lot of stage 2s, like Gardevoir, Dusclops. You can't get Nidoqueen with it because Nidoqueen's a 101 that you play in the deck. But anything that you play a stage 1 with, like Darkness Grace for Kirlia is really nice too, because it lets you go, okay, turn 1, I'm going to attach to a Ralts, and then I'm going to Darkness Grace to a Kirlia. And then next turn, because Kirlia was already evolved that turn, you can just straight evolve into the Gardevoir. So you hit the turn 2 Gardevoir, and if you're able to hit a DCE in some way to switch, you can Psychic Lock turn 2. So Darkness Grace is really good at keeping your consistency high as well. It's like a really good card. Frank Diaz's top 4 Gengar list, I think played 3 or 4 of those as well. It's just like in any stage 2 deck where you're like, I'm going to have to set up these Pokemon before I can attack. It's really nice to trainer lock your opponent and then search them from deck. It's a really good card for sure. So we're gonna get to some of the one of Pokemon. So you play one Unown G. Has a Poke power called Guard. Guard says essentially you can make Unown G a tool. So you bench it and then you make it a tool and you attach it to one of your Pokemon, and it can't be touched by effects of attack. So you can still get hit by damage. So Garchomp Sea Level X still snipes you for 80, but like, let's say you're versus a Gengar deck and they try to Shadow Room you. If you have an Unown G on your Pixie, because usually they hit your sprites, but they can also hit your Gardevoir. Put an Unown G on there, and then you're not getting sniped for 60, which is a big deal, especially when your Gardevoirs have 110 HP. It just means they get 2-shot, and especially if your opponent playing Gengar and they got a few shadow skips in, it's just like bad news bears. So yeah, Guard is kind of a Gengar tech. It's also nice against a few other things, like anything that hits you for special conditions. Anything that hits you for special conditions. So let's say you're playing against like a Gliscor deck. Gliscor has a free attack that either burns or poisons you. So they like paralyze, burn, poison, and that's like their combo. Teleportation makes that like nothing, but being like having a special effect or a special condition on you can be really bad, because it means that, like, say you have a Gardevoir level X active, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to teleportation out of this paralyze. If they like paralyze you and they hit you with a poison, you're kind of just screwed. Like, I mean, you're screwed anyway because you're paralyzed, but like having the Unown G, it has a lot of uses, like mostly for Gengar, but also for like special conditions. It can be really good if you ever go up against a deck that's playing special conditions in an attack. So you also play one Uxie. Uxie is really staple. Seeing only one is kind of odd, but again, with Telepass, you don't really worry about your consistency that much. So it has a Poke Power called Setup. Once on your turn, when you put Uxie from your hand onto your bench, you may draw cards until you have 7 in your hand. So that's a really, really good power. Pretty telling on why it's a staple card in a lot of lists. Psychic Restore is actually really nice too, though, because with Gardevoir level X's Bring Down, the sprites are kind of your liabilities. I mean, Spiritombs too, but usually your Spiritombs end up dying because you put damage counters on them and then they just get sniped out. But Psychic Restore is nice because if you have to bench an Uxie, you can Psychic Restore it back to the deck, and then if you only have like stage 2 Pokemon left in play, Bring Down becomes that much better because you're not worried about killing your own Uxie, and you can just kill something on their board if they happen to drop a sprite. Okay, so you're playing Azelf as well. So Time Walk Azelf is super good, also super staple. Poke Power Time Walk. Once during your turn, when you put Azelf from your hand onto your bench, you may look at all of your face down prize cards. If you do, you may choose one Pokemon you find there, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, and then switch a card with that card. And it's really good because you play a lot of like one of Pokemon that are really important in this deck. Like you play one Gallade, you play one Gardevoir level X, you play a 1/1 Claydol line, you only play a 1/1 Dusknoir, and that card can be really important too. So just like finding, you play so many like important Pokemon that eventually the way the game goes is you're just going to prize them. So time walking to be able to get those important Pokemon back in your hand is definitely really nice. Lockup's okay too, I guess. It's not as good as Psychic Restore, but for a Psychic you do 20 and then your opponent can't retreat. So that's pretty good. You mostly play it for the time walk though, and another reason you play it is so you can play Azelf level X. So Azelf level X has 90 HP and it has a body that says each of your psychic Pokemon has no weakness, which is really, really good because a lot of the ways opposing decks like handle Gardevoir is by hitting it for weakness, because it does have a fair amount of HP, especially as a level X. Like 130 is a fair amount to hit, and 110 is a little easier to hit, but like with a 30 weakness, it's super possible. Like if you have a Uxie level X and you Zen Blade for DCE, you're doing 60, and then 90 if you have an Expert Belt, you're killing a Gardevoir. So that's one thing that is kind of mitigated by Azelf level X. If your opponent's playing a Gengar and they hit you for second attack on the game. Don't remember the name of the attack. I'm gonna post the Gengar so you can see it. But yeah, they can hit you for like, if they hit 2 trainers, Poltergeist, that's what it is. So they if they hit two trainers in your hand, it does 30 times the amount of trainers in your hand. And if you hit 2 and they have an Expert Belt on, it kills a Gardevoir, which is pretty bad. Like Gengar is one of your harder matchups because they're not also weak to Psychic. Like you're weak to Psychic because you're a Psychic type. They're a Ghost type, so they're weak to Dark, and that can just be really bad for you for sure. So Psychic Aura, getting rid of those important weaknesses is a really vital part, especially as soon as you hit the level X. Like getting ×2 weakness is pretty easy to knock out as soon as it gets that ×2. Deep Balance is okay as well. So for one Psychic, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So like, depending on what deck your opponent's playing, that can be really good in the late game, but usually you don't really have the energy to afford to be putting on an Azelf for the most part. Okay, so you play a 1/1 Claydol, and I'm going to talk about this Baltoy for a second. The reason you play the Psychic Baltoy is just because you play Moonlight Stadium. So Moonlight Stadium says Psychic and Dark Pokemon have free retreat, and you know, you could play the fighting one. It does have a better attack, but having free retreat, especially when you want to get into a Keystone Seal situation right away with Spiritomb, is definitely the optimal call. So yeah, it has 2 attacks. 1 for 10. It does spinning attack and then quick turn 20 times for DCE. Flip 2 coins. It does 20 damage time. That's the amount of heads. If you're attacking with Baltoy, you're probably having a rough game, but the reason you play Baltoy is for Claydol. Claydol is really good. Cosmic Power, staple in 2010, one of the best support powers that exists. So Cosmic Power says once during your turn, you may choose up to 2 cards from your hand and put them at the bottom of your deck in any order. If you do, draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. So this is not only good because it gets rid of cards that you want later in the game. Like let's say you have like Judges turn 2. You're like, I don't really want to judge because I need more cards to set up myself. You get rid of them, and then you start drawing into your cards that you do need. And not only are you just putting them back in your deck, like if Cosmic Power said shuffle them back into your deck, that would be good. But the fact that you're putting to the bottom of your deck just means that like you're definitely not going to be drawing those cards, and you know that. So it's a really, really good consistency. 80 HP is like pretty bad, to be honest. Being able to get sniped out by Garchomp sucks. And it's one of the reasons that Garchomp is like so good is because Claydol has 80 HP. But yeah, Cosmic Power is a great power. So let's play a 1/1 Dusknoir line. I'm gonna talk about this Duskull for a second. So the Duskull has an item. Items are an interesting part about 2010. Like some of the basic Pokemon had items. They would either be like berries that would like let you not get hit by a special condition, or like there's a Combi with honey that lets you like do different effects. But this Duskull has a Reaper Cloth, and Reaper Cloth says Duskull can evolve the turn you play it, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it's actually kind of nice because if you do start a Duskull, you can immediately go Duskull, Dusclops. And Dusclops, the reason you play the 1/1 is so that you can Darkness Grace out the Dusknoir. Like you Darkness Grace search for the Dusclops. But when you do that, like if you have the just Duskull, Dusclops in your hand, you can go Duskull, Dusclops, and then you Darkness Grace for a Dusknoir, and you start threatening your opponent like right away. Because as soon as Dusknoir is on your board, Dark Palm says you can bench as many Pokemon as you want, but I'm going to be Dark Palming them back if you decide to do that. And not to mention, I'm going to be Dark Palming probably the Pokemon that has energy on it. Because as soon as you start Dark Palming your opponent's Pokemon that have energy, you're essentially deleting their turns. Because their one attach that they got for turn, you're saying, I'm going to put that back in your deck. Even if you are able to find Pokemon, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be attacking a long time before you are. So that combo is kind of cool, and it's the reason you play the thicker Dusknoir line. The 1/1/1 is so you can search it with Darkness Grace. But yeah, that Dusknoir is super strong. So the deck also plays a 1/1 Nidoqueen. And the Nidoran, I'm going to talk about the Nidoran for just a second. It has a attack called Offer Help for DCE. Search your deck for a supporter card, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck afterward. So it's just like consistent. If you have a DCE and a Nidoran start, at least you have something going. So it's kind of nice when they put attacks like that on basic Pokemon. But yeah, the reason you play is for the Nidoqueen. And Nidoqueen has 120 HP and has a body called Maternal Comfort. Anytime between turns, remove 1 damage counter from each of your Pokemon. So that's crazy good because Maternal Comfort lets you play a really, really long game with Gardevoir. Let's say you're able to hit like 3 Gardevoirs. Let's say you're able to hit your optimal setup. Go like Gardevoir, Teleportation, which is the level X, into the level X, Psychic Lock. So you Psychic Lock 1 turn, switch, Psychic Lock. You take a hit from the other one. And then let's say you take like 60. Then all of a sudden that's it. 40 because 1, 2 back to you. And then you switch again with like a Moonlight Stadium or something. And then you go switch back to a different Gardevoir. And then Psychic Lock again. So you're keeping the lock. And then you go one more time back to the original. And by that time, the original Gardevoir that you attacked with first is fully healed. Because you've had 3 turns of attacking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the amount of in-between turns there's been. And because of that, you've just healed off 60 damage. And then if your opponent's not doing more than 60 damage, they're not keeping any damage on the board as long as you are finding those Moonlight Stadiums or switch options. And Teleportation's so nice because it lets you go just like, Teleportation, put it in the active, attack. Teleportation again, switch it with a bench, attack. And then you find like 1 switch, and then all of a sudden you're just like healing all over the place. So Maternal Comfort is super strong. Mega Punch is pretty good too. For 1 Psychic, it does 40. But yeah, you usually don't want to be dedicating energy onto that Nidoqueen if you can prevent it. You don't play that many energy, so it's kind of a waste at that point, really. You want them on a Gardevoir. Okay, so we're gonna get into some of the trainers. So you play 4 Rare Candy. So a lot of people probably haven't seen the art for this Rare Candy. It's kind of a neat little Rare Candy. It's a Japanese only print. My friend Josh, he's lended me all these 2010 decks, which is real nice of him. But this list is entirely in Japanese, and seeing the 4 candies is really nice. Well, entirely except for 2 expert belts, but I keep them on the DL, I guess. So yeah, 4 candies. Candies is really good. It's broken in this format because there's no rule with Rare Candy, so it lets you just break the evolution rule. You can go like Ralts, Rare Candy, Gardevoir, turn 1. So if you're able to hit a Candy Gardevoir turn 1, it just means that you're telepassing right away, which is like so consistent. You play 4 just so you can you play like 4 or 3 stage 2 lines, like the Gardevoir, the Dusknoir, and the Nidoqueen. So playing 4 makes a lot of sense. I also play 2 Expert Belt. Expert Belt is really good too because it lets you force your opponent into a longer game by only killing Gardevoir. So you only play 3 Gardevoir and a Gallade, and that's usually what you're attacking with every game. Like your attackers is usually just your Gardevoir line. But Expert Belt, that's only 4 prizes usually. But with Expert Belt, 2 more prizes on each of those Pokemon. Usually one of them's on the level X, means that you're forcing your opponent to play a full 6 prize game instead of just like killing 3 Gardevoirs and a Gallade and then 2 other things that they can easily kill. So yeah, Expert Belt is definitely good, and it lets you hit for like even bigger numbers. Like hitting for 80 on Psychic Lock is really good because 2 hits of 80 is enough to one-shot like almost anything. Like a Gyarados with an Expert Belt at one-shots. It doesn't kill like a Steelix with a bunch of metals, but like being able to hit for 80 instead of 60 is a big deal because it means that if your opponent hits those like Expert Belts to keep just out of numbers, like say for example it's on a Garchomp, instead of having 110 HP, it gives it 130. So you're attacking it 3 times with a Psychic Lock to kill, which is pretty bad. You definitely would rather that be 2, and that's kind of why Expert Belt's there. Is it ups your longevity a little bit because it also gives you that plus 20 HP buff, it puts you up to 130, and it also buffs your attack so that you want to be 2-shotting pretty much anything. And if you're doing any more than that, it's like fine, but usually you'd rather be two-shotting it, because the longer you give your opponent, the more likely they are to get set up. And one of the reasons this deck is so good is it prevents your opponent from getting set up by locking trainers and locking powers. Deck also plays one Pokemon Communication. Pokemon Communication is really good. You play so many Pokemon. How many Pokemon? 25, so almost half of your deck is Pokemon. So if you ever find a Calm, usually you have another Pokemon in your hand that you don't want, especially with like Claydol. You just find Pokemon all the time that you don't need because you're drawing so many cards. So Calm is nice because you play so many different Pokemon that it just lets you search the one that you need. Yeah, Calm is really good, one Calm. Deck also plays a Night Maintenance. Night Maintenance says you can shuffle 3 in any combination of basic energy cards and Pokemon back into your deck. So it's nice for a couple reasons. One of them is if you prize like multiple parts of a Gardevoir line, it means that you can still get that full 6 prize game with Gardevoirs. The other reason it's nice is you can get your level X back. Getting a level X back with a Night Maintenance is really clutch. But yeah, getting your Claydol back, there's a lot of reasons Night Maintenance can be good. You play a Luxury Ball as well. Luxury Ball is pretty staple in 2010. Really good card. Just a trainer. Play it, search your deck for a non-level X Pokemon and put it in your hand. So just really good and kind of lets you search whatever you need. Your deck also plays 2 Moonlight Stadium. Moonlight Stadium is a really good card in this deck for a couple of reasons. One of them is that it allows your Spiritombs to have free retreat. So you always want to put it up, and then you always want to be able to get it out whenever you need, right? Like as soon as you hit that Psychic Lock turn, you want to go, okay, I don't need the Spiritomb anymore. I need to be locking powers now because my opponent's going to be setting up. So it lets you just go Moonlight Stadium, switch for free, and then start attacking. Or like vice versa, like if you start like a Ralts and you're like, oh man, I really need to get this Spiritomb into the active so that I can start setting up my board. Moonlight Stadium just says, okay, now you get free retreat into the Spiritomb. There's a lot of like switching around that you do, which is another reason that Gardevoir level X's teleportation is so good. And Moonlight Stadium just kind of fits with that theme of being able to switch whenever you'd like to. Okay, so we're gonna get to the supporters. Deck plays 4 Roseanne's Research. Roseanne's is a really good card, and I actually think Roseanne's is one of the most vital parts of this deck because of Gallade. So you only play 4 Psychic Energy and a Fighting, but with Roseanne, and that seems kind of inconsistent, right? Like 1 Fighting Energy for a 1-of fighting tech that is really good, but how often are you going to see those 2 1-ofs? A lot if you play Roseanne's, apparently. So Roseanne says you can search your deck for 2 in combination of basic energy cards and basic Pokemon, and then put them into your hand. So really good, lets you find that Spiritomb early if you need, and then an energy to retreat into the Spiritomb. That's a good combo that you can use with Roseanne's. Lets you find that 1-of fighting energy when you need it. Lets you find like a Baltoy and a Ralts if you already started a Spiritomb. There's a lot of reasons Roseanne's is really good. It keeps your energy attachments really consistent too. You really want a Psychic on a Ralts turn 1 so that if you do pop off turn 2 where you go like Moonlight Stadium, Rare Candy, Gardevoir, DCE, you have the ability to like hit that attack, because missing your turn 1 attach means you're missing a turn 2 Psychic Lock, and it's pretty bad. You definitely don't want to miss your, like, you don't hit turn 2 Psychic Lock every game, that'd be broken. But if you miss an energy, it means you're guaranteed not hitting Psychic Lock next turn, and that can be definitely not what you want. Okay, so deck also plays 4 Bebe Search. Bebe Search is another staple supporter card of the format. Take a card from your hand, put it on the top of your deck, search your deck for a Pokemon, and put it in your hand. Bebe's is really nice because it lets you find your level X Pokemon. It's the only thing other than Pokemon Communication that lets you do that. So it is really good. It also keeps it consistent because it finds your Claydols too. So as soon as you are able to hit a Baltoy turn 1, if you had a Bebe's turn 2 and a Roseanne's turn 1, even if you have no way to get Spiritomb out, at least you're Claydoling for something. So yeah, Bebe Search is super good for sure. Also play 2 Judge. Judge is a really effective card in this deck for a couple of reasons. So one of them is just Judge is really good in general. Like putting your opponent down to 4 is solid, but the reason that Judge is so good in this deck is because you can Judge and then not suffer the consequences. Like a lot of the times Judge is in a format and doesn't get played is because putting yourself down to 4 also sucks. But the reason Gardevoir can play 2 is because of Telepath. So you can judge your opponent, be like, okay, I'm going to put you down to 4, but also you have a Bebe's in your deck, so I'm gonna judge myself down to 4 and then Bebe's for a Claydol and then put 2 cards back and then draw to 6. And all of a sudden you're in a crap position because I just put you down to 4 and power locked you. But I'm chilling right now. Like, there's so many ways that you can judge and then be fine. Like, you can judge and have a Claydol, but judge and telepass is a really nice combination, and that's, I think, the reason that you play 2 judge is also because, you know, judge lets you go, I'm gonna judge you and then psychic lock you, and if you're out to draw is a Pokemon with the power, it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of supporters in this format are like Pokemon search, like 4 Roseanne's 4 Bebes is this deck, and a lot of decks played 4/4 Roseanne's Bebes, and the reason you play that is because you can Roseanne's for a Uxie and then Uxie to draw, or Bebes for a Claydol and Claydol to draw. But if you judge your opponent and then psychic lock them, not only can they not draw the power Pokemon that they use to set up like Uxie or Claydol, they're forced to hit just a straight draw supporter, like a Professor Oak's New Theory or like something else that like just draws them cards. And a lot of the time in this format especially, like, there's a lot of search that finds you Pokemon, but there's not a lot of like hand refresh draw. So being able to put your opponent down to 4 is definitely a really effective strategy at messing them up. Deck also plays 1 Looker's Investigation. Kind of fits with the same theme of hand disruption. So Looker says, look at your opponent's hand, and then you can either shuffle draw 5 yourself or force your opponent to shuffle draw. So if you look at their hand and you see that they have like an Uxie and some other stuff that you don't care about because you're going to power lock, you let them keep it. But if they have like a Pont or something that like lets them draw cards or have something, usually you're telling them to shuffle back and draw 5. So it's another one of those hand disturbances that can also be consistency. And, you know, with 11 supporters, it seems kind of low compared to like some other decks, but you have to remember that you're also playing Gardevoir. So Telepass essentially lets you play double supporter turns, and when you're playing 2 supporters in a turn, you don't really need that many once you're set up. All you really need is energy at that point. So yeah, 11 seems low, but it's not that low. Okay, so we're going to start getting into the energy now. Deck plays 4 Call energy. Call is a great energy. It's one of the best energies from 2010. So Call says, if it's on your active Pokemon, you may activate Call. Search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon, and I think it's put them on your bench. It's either on your bench or in your hand. Sorry, it's Japanese, so not 100% sure there. But yeah, so the search for 2, I think it's straight onto the bench, actually. I'm pretty sure it is. So yeah, being able to search for 2 and then just put those Pokemon straight onto the bench, it just means you're setting up that much faster. And like, yeah, it's straight onto the bench. So it's great because if you call, it lets you call. Let's say you start with like a Ralts and nothing else. You have a call. You go Ralts, call. I'm going to get a Spiritomb and a Baltoy. And then next turn, you just retreat and Darkness Grace into the Claydol. You lock everyone's trainers so that hopefully your opponent's getting slowed down enough that their speed's not a big deal. And then you also just hit a Claydol. So all of a sudden, you know, your 2-card hand of everything else sucks, but this Call and this Ralts gives you at least something to go off of. So yeah, Call is definitely really good at keeping you consistent. Deck also plays 4 Double Colorless Energy. Double Colorless Energy is a really, really good card. Probably the best Pokemon card ever printed. It's 2 energy for 1 energy. Seems good. And the reason you play 4 DCE is so that you can Psychic Lock. It also lets you Psychic Blade. Psychic Blade is Gallade's attack. But yeah, Psychic Lock is super, super good. And it requires a DCE. That's the only way you can get it off turn 2 is with the Psychic and the Double Colorless attached. So you play 4 that you're able to be consistent with that Psychic Lock. Okay, so deck also plays 4 Psychic Energy. Just makes sense, right? Like you play 4 Gardevoirs in a game, so with Night Maintenance and 4 Psychics should be fine. Like the reason you play like such skimpy energy lines is because Roseanne's lets you kind of just be cheeky about that. Like you're not really worried about, oh, I hope I don't draw into Psychic, because a lot of your like basic supporter cards let you just find energy, and it's also the reason that you're able to play just like 1 fighting, because you know that seems kind of inconsistent. You only play 1 Gallade, 1 fighting energy. What are the odds that the turn that you need to use Sonic Blade is the turn that you're going to have the fighting energy? Well, as it turns out, when you play 4 Roseanne's Research, pretty high. Like the odds are pretty good. So yeah, that's the energy line. Yeah, this has been GG from 2010. If you have any questions about the deck, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get to them. But yeah, thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time.